no shout. We were only 7. Together every night. But we are not 7 with you.
0 o'clock episode, which means it's more calm, more fun, and we just get to enjoy and don't let our inner come out, except for specific moments where we just can't help ourselves. Too much shade. We have a very, very special guest on the podcast. This is the first time we have a guest on the podcast. I'd like to introduce you to, you know her as Research BTS, but her name is Nicole. And Nicole, say hi.
Hello. Happy to be on here.
Yeah, and we're gonna have fun. We're gonna talk about her research, all those amazing maps she does, and get to know her and everything she does a little bit more and get into details. You all sent some pretty amazing questions, and we're gonna go through all of them. Don't worry, we're not skipping a single one, I hope. And you'll get your answers. And yeah, so let's get started. Do you feel like that opening that Twitter account, like doing all that research and looking at this from an academic point of view, takes away a bit from your fandom experience?
So it's definitely enhanced my experience for sure. Like I said, I've learned things that I never imagined I would have learned about BTS and ARMY, which is super cool. I think at the same time though, I've done a lot consistently, like, you know, keeping track of trends and especially these maps whenever something trends, that like I almost feel obligated to like do that. And it's totally fine because I love doing it and I love sharing that information, but there are moments where I'm like, oh, I just don't really want to be on Twitter, but then feel guilty at the same time where I'm like, oh my God, but what if I miss something? Like, you know, and not just me, but like in general, taking a break from social media is like a good thing. And you know, especially us in the fandom too, like there's so much that happens that it does get overwhelming. And like I said, sometimes I do feel guilty about not being able to do certain things, but I've found that balance a little bit to help not feel that guilt as much. Because like I said, I'm outside of BTS research and doing all of that. I work full time and I'm like doing all these different things. So sometimes I can't get to my Twitter, but I do have a little bit of the anxiety, like, oh my God, am I missing like a hashtag that's like trending? But, you know, I do sometimes wish that I could like look at trends and look at things happening in the BTS world and not have to worry about like, oh, should I be running data on this or should I be like creating a map for it? Sometimes I'm too tired, but at the end of the day, I love doing it because I know that it's important to record these sorts of things. So I love it anyway, no matter how tired I get. So it definitely enhances the experience for sure as a whole. So
yeah. You first became an ARMY and then started doing the research, right?
You know, it's so hard to like look at it now. I think right before I started the account, I was like referring to myself as an ARMY, but like I also wasn't really talking to anybody about BTS. So it's like I was more talking to myself and like watching things by myself and being like, oh, I love BTS. But I don't think I necessarily in my mind was like, am I an ARMY? Am I not an ARMY? I just was like, I love BTS and that's it. I think it was once I joined the fandom, then I was like, okay, definitely I'm an ARMY. Like I said, when you start to interact with people, like you start to feel that community and you start to identify a little bit strongly. But I'm pretty sure that before I had this Twitter, if people asked me if I was an ARMY, I probably said yes anyway, but I don't think I really like fully understood to the extent of like what that meant to be an ARMY was until I started the Twitter and started like really observing everything and being more involved. Because there's really so much more to it than just loving their music, right? There's like, it's so complex in this fandom, but yeah, and I would imagine that everyone's fan experience, the more they interact with the fandom as a whole, like that definitely gets stronger for a lot of people. So that was kind of my process.
Yeah, I think I find it really interesting. Like before, like growing up, I was more into rock and roll. Like I love Linkin Park, which I know is not exactly rock and roll, but I love it.
There's a lot of ARMYs who love Linkin Park.
I think there's a lot of correlation between they combined um, rap with they chose rock, but BTS does it with pop. Though I think there's a lot to say that in the end is kind of poppy. But they also like they have messages. I think overall the concept is not that far off. And I listen to Metallica and Pink Floyd and The Who and Queen. Like that's the kind of music Red Hot Chili Peppers. That's the music I listen to, and I always liked pop, but it was like it's fun to dance to, but it's not really music with a substance. So I would listen to MTV a lot in the early 2000s. I watched every VMA.
Yeah.
That was like right in my peak high school years. We used to go in high school. We go clubbing like from on Friday nights, like from midnight to 6 a.m. That's in high school, like, and it's normal. So you go dancing almost every weekend. So obviously a lot of pop, but I've never been the girl to have posters on her wall. And this is only because of the podcast. But like I wouldn't get merchandise. I wouldn't. That wasn't me. So to go from that to say I'm an ARMY, I'm a fan of a pop group was such a big thing for me, and my family was like kind of shuddering against it and like looking at it a bit weird. And also the word for fangirls is worshiper, not just girls. Like if you love a band, the word is like worshipped. They're literally idols that you worship and like you idolize. And but it is like worship. That's the word. And for football fans, it's fans. So they get fans, but we worship. So I say fans. I refuse to say worship. I don't worship anyone. Like, so I think just that word alone, like even if you use a word a lot of time, it kind of loses its meaning. Still, every time I say that word, I would like cringe because it's words have power, and when you use it and you define yourself as someone like that, I couldn't do it. And to bring myself to a point to say, yes, I'm an ARMY. Yes, I have zero shame about it. I've never been ashamed of the music itself, but to be part of a fandom and to have that a fanatic association with you, and that was for me a really hard thing to pass. And once I got to Twitter and I saw so many people around me, virtually around me like that, and found that community, it made everything so much easier, and really I felt embraced by it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even me too. Like I said, I don't really know too. I've met some newer ARMYs, obviously, in here where I'm from, but that's like through Twitter, and because here in Las Vegas they have a Las Vegas group, and it's like a bunch of awesome ARMYs. But before that, I didn't have people around me who liked BTS, that I wasn't sure of like how I was going to be perceived as like the fact that I liked it. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really tell people about it. I just was like, oh yeah, like low key was like, yeah, I like them. But then like I would go home and like watch like everything, and so I think finding ARMY and being able to interact and engage with them like makes me even more proud to be a fan. And I agree with you. It is strange because we don't use that term a lot, like the worship term, but I know that people see it as that. And it's not quite that, but I'm just like you, super glad that I've been able to find ARMY and interact with them and feel a little bit more comfortable and confident in the fact that I do love this. So yeah.
I honestly, I feel like I have like a whole bunch, like, we all have different ages and stuff, but I wrote on Twitter at the start of this week that I have to finish my thesis. I have to finish writing it. And I told my mom asked me, like, as a birthday present for her, to finish writing it by next Friday. Because I have to start looking for jobs, and it's kind of like I'm saying, like, until I finish writing it, I'm not looking for a job. Because I get like funding and scholarships from the university, so I don't work as like, until this year I worked at the university teaching, but this year I'm not teaching, so I only get like scholarships, which are pretty decent. Like I'll be fine, but but I have to start looking for a real job now. And my mom's like, okay, so please by next week, Friday next week, finish it. So I posted like, if you see me on Twitter, that means I'm procrastinating and I'm not writing my thesis. And since then, like on every tweet I write, people are like, so how's your thesis going? I feel like I got a whole bunch of army moms looking out for me, making sure I study.
Are you going to meet your deadline?
Yeah.
Oh
Are
my
you doing
god.
what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, that is so funny. Well, I hope you get to that day that your mom wants you to finish it. I think.
It's the first draft. I have to finish the first draft to send.
Oh, okay. So that's yeah. It's not too bad.
Yeah. It's mostly copy pasting from articles and stuff, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, there you go.
Few nights without sleep, I got this.
Yeah. Like once you get past it, you're like, okay, good. Like the worst is over at this point so far.
Yeah, I wrote my master's, including my PhD proposal, like one thing, in 4 days. So I'm good.
Oh, I'm the same. I see, I procrastinate way too much. I remember when I did my master's thesis, I waited till I had all the data ready and everything, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it tomorrow, and then I was like, oh man, I only have like a couple of days left to like write my first draft. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's not good. Like people think like once you get to grad school and stuff, like procrastination stops. Like it gets worse. It almost gets
I
bad.
embraced it. I was like,
yeah, same here. Yeah, I agree. I'm the exact same.
I know to write a research paper, it takes me a season and a half of comedy show, like Modern Family, Big Bang Theory. Like I put it in the background because like I know it by heart. Friends, like I know it all by heart, so I just put it in the background.
Yeah.
The white noise machine. And it takes me a scientific article, a season and a half. So that's like 8 to 12 hours.
That's good. That's good. I'm gonna have to time myself next time because I'm assuming I'm gonna be the exact same. So
we'll see what this is thesis, how long it takes.
Yeah, seriously. I love that.
Yeah. Thankfully, like I already have like for us, they kind of not force us, but they encourage us a lot to publish like in papers and to finish the PhD with 3 papers.
3 papers, okay.
Yeah, that's like kind of, they say it's recommended, it's practically mandatory in our department. So I have those 3. Honestly, I have there's also a 4th one for my master's. I have 4. So a lot of it is just like copy pasting and organizing everything and stuff.
Yeah, not too bad. And especially if you know your stuff, like it's not too complicated either. Yeah, it's the same with our department too. Once you enter, they really encourage you to publish a couple, and like even after in the first year, like they encourage you to go to at least a conference and present. So yeah.
Yeah, because here we don't have a lot of like international conferences. There's like one every 2 years, so we actually get funding to go to conferences.
That's cool.
Like once a year, once or twice a year. Plus, there's also like extra funding that you can get. So I really took advantage of it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I was like look at the globe, say this is where I want to go, find a conference there.
Awesome. Yeah, sure. I mean, I would do it too, and certainly recommend any student who could get funding to do that too. Obviously, it's tough right now with COVID, but once the opportunity is there, for sure, it's yeah.
Did you get a chance? Like, did you publish already papers on
I
or One Direction?
No, so I'm sure you'll understand this too, and other master students and grad students. So I sped through my master's program. So I finished it in about a year and a half, but this was all like working full time too. So in my professional career, I'm a communications PR professional. So that's what I do full time. And that's probably why I don't get sleep, because I do that plus school. So I was doing my master's full time and then going to work full time. So I would go to work early, go to class, come back to work, and then go home and do my thesis. And that was like an everyday thing. So I barely got any sleep. So by the time I got done with my thesis, I was like, I don't even want to look at this anymore. Like I was so burned out. And when it came time, like I had professors who were like, oh, okay, so like now let's go publish. And I'm like, let me wait on that. I think also at that time, it wasn't really emphasized as much the importance of publishing, or like, and so in my head, I was like, do I really even need it? And totally wish I did, and wish I went back to it. But you know, certainly now that I'm doing this with Army and BTS, there's a lot more opportunities there. And so I am working on a couple projects with some other researchers and academics. So there's definitely a lot of potential to publish in the next couple months to a year. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. And yeah, so this time around, I won't miss that chance. So
You have to let us know when you do, like that.
yeah, definitely. I mean, and even aside from me, I'm sure there's going to be tons of other papers that we'll start to see, and I'm excited to help promote those as well. So
Definitely, it's amazing. I'm so excited for it.
yeah.
Because when you read a paper, it's like it's structured. It tells a story, and to follow it from an academic point of view, I think it will. I'm sure every paper will be fascinating.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about BTS and Army anyway, and like so many things that we don't know yet. Like even though we think we know everything about BTS and Army, but from an academic perspective, there's still a lot that we ourselves and like the world doesn't even know. And you know, I think what's exciting about it, right, is like providing new knowledge to the world from this academic standpoint. And there's so many implications, and we talked about it, right? Like from a marketing standpoint, promotional standpoint, but even in fields like sociology. And you know, I'm working on research with a professor, and she teaches information science, and she's going to have a class this fall just based on information science through BTS. And like, so we're seeing classes implementing BTS Army into the classroom. So I mean, there's a lot to take from what's happening in the fandom and in BTS, and using that as something to learn from in the classrooms. It definitely makes it more interesting. So I really hope, like, that's a really cool thing for me, and I hope that more classes start to pop up that are just focused on BTS. I think that would be so fun.
It really would. I would go and sign up like for internet classes like that.
Yeah, I'm sure people who aren't even in that major would like want to be. So it'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you find like, because you publish those maps all the time, is it problematic that you put your research out there before it's fully realized?
Yeah. So the maps itself, like they aren't, and they weren't initially supposed to be any part of my research. Like I said, it was just something that I did for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the impact that it's had, and I do realize its importance in telling stories about like that global aspect of the fandom and its relation to social media, that's certainly something that I do want to publish on later. It's something that myself and another Army are thinking about. But I actually asked this question to somebody like 2 days ago. I asked if there was any issues with like publishing things like these, and publishing work that I wanted to, you know, put out in articles and that sort of stuff. And I think the rule of caution is, if you submit a paper and it's in review and you're waiting for a decision, you probably shouldn't be publishing like that full thing like anywhere. But I think in the meantime, like a lot of what I put out is just super like bits and pieces and snapshots. So I don't think it's like, I don't worry about it too much.
It's also not the story. It doesn't have the conclusions. It's just
and which is so and like that's the thing too. It's so hard with Twitter because you're so limited and like in that storytelling, which is probably why like I started that medium where I was able to explain things a little bit more. But like Twitter is great for those little snapshots, but I'm excited for what's to come when I'm able to write more of those like journal articles to really go in depth and, you know, to talk about things like theories and, you know, like have all those implications put into it. I think it'll really go in depth and help to give even more information and about these maps that and the data that I put out that is like beyond what people probably even like think about, because there's even things on the back end that I have so much data like that I don't even know what to do with. So hopefully I'll
academic.
Yeah, exactly. Like I just have it there and it's sitting there, and I definitely want to do something with it. If there were more hours in the day, I'd for sure get to it sooner, but hopefully I'll get to it one day. But in the meantime, it's like baby steps, right? Like I have like I said, couple projects in the pipeline in these coming months. So hopefully we'll get those out and published for not only Army, but like everybody to see, and hopefully they'll take something good away from it. So
Well, good luck. We can't wait to
Yeah.
see. Do you, when you look at trends and stuff, are you limited to English, or is it in all languages using the BTS tag or?
Right. So I mainly keep track of the worldwide trends. So anything beyond that, I don't really take a look at, because it would be even tougher. 'Cause I mean, even just looking at the US trends, it's like so much more. I mean, if we collected numbers from each individual country, it would probably be way more than what we see in the worldwide trends. But I like the worldwide aspect just because it still has that global aspect to it. And so I initially I was like, well, I don't understand Korean or any other languages, so maybe I'll just stick to English. But I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't too difficult to identify like hashtags and trends that were related to BTS. So if I did see it and it was in another language, I still kept track of it. But I think the beauty of it too, right, is even if it's in a different language, like armies who don't even understand it still participate anyway, which is really cool. So that's why I always thought it was important to then make sure that I was including trends that had foreign languages in these types of lists, because it still is part of that storytelling of armies, like structure and their interactions. So yeah.
Do you find it problematic now that Twitter removed the worldwide trends?
Yeah, so this is super interesting, right? Because I still have my worldwide trends, but I do know that a good chunk of people don't have it anymore. Yeah, I was really upset about it, hearing the news, and it's still confusing. Like, I don't know if they're like when they're fully getting rid of it or like what's going on, but I do know that I've not updated my app or my phone or anything because I'm so terrified that it's gonna go away.
If you update, it disappears. Like
That's what I was hearing. Yeah.
I updated mine for some reason. I can't, like I had worldwide trends, and then I decided to update, and then it disappeared. And so I have Android, so I just uninstalled and downloaded an old version of the app that still has the worldwide trends, and then it got back. So
okay, yeah,
that's the trick.
I know some people have been able to like go through their settings and like figure it out and see it again, but I know for like a ton of people they aren't able to see it, so it's kind of a shame. Considering that worldwide trends is something that I've been studying even like during my master's, and it was like a big part of what I looked at. I was pretty mad about it. I don't know. I think it's hard to also go back to like the countries. Like, what was frustrating is Twitter saying that this was a way for us to see things that were more like relevant to us. But I mean, we could have opted to change our settings to like more local based trends.
Yeah, that option was there. Like,
yeah, that option was there, but a lot of, and some people have that, but then there's a lot of people who are like, I don't really care about that. I just want to see the worldwide trends.
If I set it to mine, it has hello, goodbye, good day. Like, that's the kind of words, because no one uses this app here.
So you get all these, yeah. So that's so crazy. See, and I feel like I don't think Twitter has really seen like the impact of that just yet. And that's really interesting to me, because you bring up a good point. If people aren't really super active on Twitter, then you're just gonna get like a ton of random words popping up.
The word yes.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about the purpose and like function of Twitter is like to bring people together from around the world and to share news together. And so it's like I don't really know what's going on with all of that, but I do know a lot of people love the worldwide trends, because aside from the fact, yes, that BTS ARMY, they do take it over quite a bit, but there's a lot of information there that people learn about that they wouldn't have learned like at a local level, right? And so I'm just curious to see what happens if it is completely taken away. Like, are we still, I think someone asked me like, how does this affect like the fandom? And I think that the fandom itself is already so connected in general that I don't think it's necessarily going to affect us on this like level of like, are we not going to be on the same page anymore? Are we not going to know certain things? Because I think word travels pretty quickly anyway, and it's like we already
trend stuff by accident all the time.
Yeah, so we're like in the fact that we're so connected as a fandom and like networked on social media. I don't think that that's too big of a deal. What kind of sucks is I know from the perspective like of a promotional aspect, a lot of armies love that BTS pops up in the worldwide trends because a lot of the general public is able to discover them. So that's kind of an aspect that might go away. But
With Twitter not allowing BTS themselves to trend.
yeah, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, I know. I get so many questions about this. So yeah, so it's interesting. For people that don't know how Twitter trends work, trends are based on like breaking news. Essentially, it's not like some people think. Oh, people have talked about BTS like a million times over the last like day or two. Like that itself doesn't cause BTS to trend. There needs to be this like really instant spike in Twitter data. So that's why we see a lot of random weird words trending. It's because everybody at one exact moment has the same reaction. Like the one that I keep thinking about is
it's density, right? It's like amount of
yeah,
tweets per second. It's not
yeah, not like total
general.
volume. Yeah, over time. Like so, for instance, like a tweet or a hashtag or a word that has like a million tweets over like 24 hours isn't going to trend over something that has like 10,000 tweets in a span of like 5 to 10 minutes. Like it's a little bit different. Which in Army's case, like looking at the back end of analytics, like it only takes them maybe like 20,000 tweets in like 5-10 minutes, and then that trends. So it's like super quick. But that's just because of the size of the fandom, right? There's so many of them that like it's so easy. But yeah, so the topic of trending has been, people have been talking about it quite a bit lately because I know that there's concern over the fact of certain members' names don't trend as often, and BTS itself doesn't trend. Like it's interesting, but it's because there's so many people talking about them all the time, and so so it's actually really complex. But so yeah, so the more people talk about something, the less it is considered this like breaking news, right? So if people are talking about it, it's a normal conversation. And people started to see this with like the Black Lives Matter hashtag. There was a lot of talk, and this is so reminiscent. I don't know if people know this, but a couple of years ago when we saw in the US with the Occupy Wall Street protest, it was the same thing. So so people thought that Twitter was banning like protest hashtags or anything like that, but in reality so many people just kept tweeting it that like, so like yeah, the first day Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street, that's trending worldwide because it's like this new topic that all of a sudden popped up. But then over time, obviously less and less people are talking about it since that peak, and then it kind of goes to like a normal conversation level. So people are still talking about it. It doesn't mean it went away. It's just, it now became normal to like Twitter standards. So again, going back to the fact that Twitter counts trends as like breaking news, it's no longer breaking news, which is why we normally see this in the fandom too. But when we saw it with like Black Lives Matter, the hashtag was changing every day, with like different spellings, but that's because you need to do that in order to trend it. So I was getting a little bit frustrated during all of that, and I sometimes get frustrated when people in the fandom like talk about that, and I totally get it. But in all honesty, Twitter is definitely not out to censor BTS's names or anything. It's just, I mean, I guess
so much that it just,
yeah. I mean, I guess it's a compliment. It's a compliment to the fandom, I guess, the fact that they talk about BTS so much. But yeah, and I think it's just really funny, and like I wish I had a better solution to it, but there's not really any other solution to helping any like member's name or BTS trend unless people just stop talking about them for like a day. That's kind of the best solution. But which is why the perfect example is people talking about like Jimin's name not trending so much. So everyone tweets Jimin like all the time, and they tweet other members' names often too. But that's why you'll most likely see members' names with like an S at the end trending like worldwide.
But you see like the nicknames, the different variations of that instead of like the stage name or the real name. Like Jimin, it's Jimin. Most like when couple karaoke came out, he trended as Mochi.
Yeah, exactly.
emoji. So that trended. But as women, because people constantly use it, like if there are 5 million tweets during a day, it doesn't trend because they're not condensed.
Yeah,
They have to
exactly,
be
exactly.
condensed.
So yeah, so there would need to be like something really, really big to happen, and like we would need to see a spike from that normal conversation to like what I don't we don't even know what the number is like in
Yeah.
a couple seconds. Like so yeah, it's tough. I mean, but regardless of that, I mean, Army trends like a million things anyway, so it's totally fine. But yeah, I know I get questions like that all the time, and I totally understand. It's so frustrating, and I wish I saw their names trending more often. But that's how trends work, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's part of it.
yeah,
Well, I think some people sent some questions, so
sure.
let's see what they did. I wrote everything down. What is the end goal? Like, what do you want to achieve with your research?
Yeah, I think I never really expect like more successes like on a personal level. I think when I first started doing research on fandoms, even at the One Direction uh, level, and then now with BTS and Army, like I myself have always been really passionate about helping to shift that narrative on fandoms and fans in general. And we talked about this, right? How people stereotype fandoms as just simply teenagers who are mindless, don't know anything, but that's really not the reality of it. And so I hope that with my work on top of many others' works, we can help to shift that narrative and hopefully inform more people outside of fandoms that this is something that we should take seriously and something that could be applied to so many other disciplines and so many like other fields. So there's that. And then I hope that for Army, I hope that the end goal of all of this research that comes out is that they continue to learn more about themselves as a fandom and really feel excited at the impact that they've been able to achieve, because it really is rare, and I'm fairly confident this time around that we're probably not going to see something like this again for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And so I hope that they learn a lot about themselves as opposed to just being like, okay, we love BTS and we have all these records, but like how can they go like more in depth to really like learn about their relationships and interactions with each other, because it is pretty amazing. So I hope they find value in that. And then me myself, I don't know what I still have another 3 years with my PhD, so I'll figure out what I want to do after that.
Yeah, you never know where it's gonna take you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the postdoc is always an option.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Did you find anything that was like surprising to you about the fandom, about the trends, about how the fandom interacts through your research?
I don't think I was surprised. I knew coming into it that there was like a certain level of power and impact with the fandom. I think it's to the like what level, that's what I didn't know. And so if anything, it was more shocking in a good way just to see like it was exceeding my expectations. I mean, like for instance, again, I mean, in tracking worldwide trends, I couldn't believe how many they create every month. Like it's so fascinating to me. And and again, like I knew how global of an impact Army and BTS had, but seeing it like on the maps, for instance, like that was the first time it like really hit me. And so like those little moments kind of help to shape my perception of that impact. And again, which is why like data like that is so important, because we think to ourselves like, yeah, we know that they have an impact and they're that big, but like just how big and how impactful are they? Like I don't know. But then being able to see that data is just like in your mind, it's so mind-blowing, like even bigger than you would think. So yeah, not surprised, but again, it's definitely exceeded a lot of my expectations, and it still continues to. It keeps growing and getting bigger in the fandom, and like they keep breaking records that I don't think that they're going to break anymore, and it just keeps going and going. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, is it just going to keep going, or is there going to be like this threshold where they're like, okay, like, and I mean, we're going to start seeing it too, right? Like as armies and continue to do all of these things, it's helping to transform like a lot of like systems, especially on social media. So I'm curious to see if platforms like, I mean, like YouTube, for instance, which I know there's a lot of like issues there, like are there going to be new changes to it to make sure that you know, they keep track of these views better? I don't know. If Spotify and you know, those music platforms, are they going to start shifting a little bit based on you know, I mean, because when you look at like armies, they stream things so much and at like such a big pace, like it they're competing against themselves at this point, which is interesting. And so I have a feeling that different, you know, organizations and social platforms are going to start looking at the way they measure these types of metrics just based on that. But I don't know. I see that as a good thing, though.
I wouldn't be surprised if like Spotify doesn't put BTS on like playlists because we stream so much. Because
Yeah.
they want to like they grade it on a curve and they want to like
Sure.
fix it a bit so it won't be so dramatic when BTS are the most streamed group.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, like I said, it is quite fascinating. Like they're competing against themselves at this point. And we're not really seeing anyone else kind of like touch those records. I mean, every once in a while, like maybe, but then Army comes back and breaks those records again. So it's like, it's kind of this cycle. So, I mean, like I said, I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. I just see it as, you know, platforms shaping and transforming due to Army's impact. So I think that has a lot to say on a good note of what Army's doing in terms of those platforms. So
we saw YouTube making dramatic changes with streaming and how they measure it.
Yeah.
How good that algorithm is remains to be questionable.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. But
No
it would
idea.
be really interesting to see how social media develops in the upcoming years. Because like we said, like 15 years ago, there wasn't. It was just starting. Like Facebook was just coming up. It wasn't. We couldn't have known what was going to happen now.
Yeah.
Now we
No
have
idea.
TikTok, and we have all these new platforms coming up, and you don't know what's going to replace what. One day, one of these platforms will be obsolete, and a new one will be formed. Like we see Spotify coming up for radio's throat, and radio might decide they're no longer like they're at the impasse now. They can be either Netflix or Blockbuster.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think so many current platforms will face that same dilemma. And we don't know what's gonna come that's gonna be new and change the whole the way we do things.
Yeah, we have no idea. I mean, like, can you imagine? I mean, I remember when all those platforms started coming out, it was around that like 2006 2007 2008 time, right? Like everything started coming out and people thought, like, there are some people who thought it was like the silliest thing, like why do we even need these things? But like now it's so ingrained in our daily lives and in our own societies, like it's so important to us. And so yeah, I mean, anything could happen tomorrow. I have no idea what new platforms are going to come out or how things are going to shift. So it'll be interesting to see all of that, and then to see how fandoms and to see how Army adapts to those types of platforms. But yeah, it's all so interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It will be really interesting to see. I feel like every time I talk about it or think about it, I feel like Jungi whenever he says like kids these days don't know.
Yeah. I know. I know.
Like 2007 is when I started university. So
yeah, I think I was in high school at that point, but yeah, I mean, you see a lot of like people on social media right now, they don't know what life was before social media. So I mean, it's so so important to our daily lives now. Like we can't even imagine life without it. So
yeah. Question is completely irrelevant, but when you as an American and when you do your bachelor right after high school, right? So at 18, 17, 18.
Yeah, 18.
Is it like hard to choose like what to study? Because I think here, like most people start university at somewhere between 22 and 25, and it's still super hard to decide what you're going to study. So I do think like at 18, I know as opposed to like here, when you start something, you already have your complete degree that's like really aimed in a very certain direction. But I know in the US, like you take different kind of classes at first, right? Like the
Yeah.
first year, like you can mix and match.
Right. Yeah. Here in America, your first year generally is all like prerequisites. So it's just a mix of
Mhm.
a bunch of different things. And I'm sure for some people it helps them figure out what they want to do, while others it's more like a chore because they might already know what they want to do and then don't want to take those other classes. For me, so it's interesting. My path to research had like really nothing to do with what I was aiming for when I was an undergrad student. So I initially was a business major because in high school I was really involved with like student organizations that had to do with like marketing and business and that whole thing. So I thought I was going to go on and be like a marketing professional, that sort of thing. But actually in my first year I was a business major and nearly failed economics. So then I was like, and that was a required
I relate
prerequisite.
to. I almost failed economics too.
Well, aside from it being a tough subject in general, I made the mistake of being like, oh, I'll take a 7:30 a.m. class, like no big deal. Because in high school, my high school the start time was around like 7:15. So I was like, well, I did it in high school, I could do it in college. Totally different. That does not work the same way. And it doesn't help the fact that you have a little bit more freedom where obviously like your professors aren't going to try and keep
Yeah.
track of you. So if you don't show up to class, like that's it. So I probably missed half of my classes because I wouldn't wake up for it. I was too tired. So after nearly failing economics, I was like, well, I need to switch my major because there's no way I'm going to take it again. And a friend had suggested that I look into a communications major. Had no idea what that even meant. But I was like, sure, why not? And looking at the credits, it was very similar as business. So I was like, well, if I can graduate like sooner than later, then that's great. And then I'll find whatever job I need. That sometimes doesn't work out for people, but luckily it worked out for me. And so eventually realized with a communications degree, I can work in public relations. So even before I graduated from college, I was able to land my first job as a PR professional, and that's what I've been doing since then. So I've been working in PR and communications for the last like maybe 9 years or so. So I've represented like I've worked in the private and public sector. So I started off working in entertainment and hospitality events sort of thing, and then moved into public sector. So I was working in communications in like education and economic development and that sort of thing. So which is a lot of fun, but I think that's why I in PR I'm so busy and like don't really get a break, but on the side I still loved like my boy bands and like all those things. So I really wanted to go back and do my master's eventually, and then did my research, like I said, while working full time. So I think the great thing about that is I have my work, and then when I want to take a break from my work, I have my research, and it almost sometimes feels more like a hobby than a chore. Because you know, I hear stories all the time about PhD students and master's students who are so miserable, and I hope that that's not the case for a lot of people, but it's certainly a reality for some. But I don't really get to experience that because I love what I do, and it like I said, when it feels like a hobby and you're like passionate about it, like it's all good. And so it's worth the lack of sleep for me. But yeah, so in choosing a major, it's interesting here in the US, and I'm sure it's a difficult decision for a lot of people. I know on average, like I heard a stat somewhere where on average like US students they change their majors at least like 3 times.
Wow.
So yeah, so I know that there's a lot of people that enter university and still don't know what they want to do, but that's totally fine, right? Like
Yeah, definitely.
you'll
Especially like at 18, how could you know?
yeah, it's tough. I mean, you have people that graduate and get their degree and then realize that's not even what they want to do, and so it's tough. But as long as people know that's okay, like making different decisions like even during college or even after it is like totally fine to change your mind for sure.
Yeah, I think the major issue is in the US, like the college experience is so expensive.
Yeah.
That's where I think it feels like, because here university is kind of cheap. It's like for the good ones, it's $3,000 a year.
Really? Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, that's
yeah.
that's so rare to get here.
Yeah, and that's the good ones. The bad ones cost more.
Really?
Yeah. So,
interesting how that works.
Yeah, because like the universities are the good and they're funded by the government, and the colleges are private and they're considered lesser than. Like the bad professors, or it's like if you go with a degree from a college versus a degree from a university, they would take the university hands down.
Yeah.
So the university is actually very cheap, and the college is, and it's not that much more. Like it's more expensive, but it's not crazy expensive, even if you do choose to go to college if you're not accepted to the university. So here, like changing your major is a lot. It doesn't have that economic instability that I think colleges in the US add to that.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Yeah, that's. I'm sure people would love to pay that money here for a university.
Yeah, it's like, but still, like a quarter of the people here change major after the first year. But like I said, like here, like for example, I chose engineering, like and a specific, like I chose material engineering, and immediately from the get-go, the classes I took were for a degree in material engineering. Like there was no extra curriculum, extra stuff. I didn't take anything from other, like from other majors or anything. It was the right math classes, the right physics classes. And when I finished, I actually, the last year I worked at Intel as like, what was I? Like I did something like with yield analysis, a lot of statistics. And I like to understand if a processor is good or not. And you don't know, but creating an Core i7 is actually takes 982 steps, and each one of those can be faulty. So you analyze like each step, and you do graphs and stuff. So I worked there, and I was like, okay, so this is engineering. I need research in my life. And then I went to research, and I do like I work with materials for green energy applications.
Awesome. Yeah. I have a lot of respect for engineers. I know what you guys do is a lot of hard work, and my boyfriend's an engineer, and I don't understand half of it, and so I know how hard all of you guys work. So
I feel like, but if I were to do like what you do or what you do like in bachelor and stuff, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I think it's also like different people fit different things. I don't think there's one that's like harder. It's just for me, yours would be harder.
Right. I appreciate that. Sometimes in my head I'm like, this feels like it's like too easy, like, and that's why I look at people like you, and like I said, my boyfriend's an engineer, and I'm like, wow, like you're all doing such cool things for the world, like that's awesome. So
yeah, but I think like it's all like relative, because for me, like what you do, I don't think I would be able to do that well. I would be able to do it, just not well. So it's all also like I think here, from what I've talked to people in the US, like there aren't a lot of women in engineering, and here, like in my department, we're 50% women.
Really? Oh, that's awesome.
And
yeah.
even in masters, there were more women than men. In PhD, we're again the same. In the very specific engineering field that have more men, but a lot of them has like an equal amount, or even like chemical engineering has more women. So here it's like very, you don't feel so much as an outlier as I feel like you would.
Yeah, there's definitely way less women in engineering here. We need more women engineers for sure here in the US. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the questions that people wrote after this tiny tangent.
Like anything.
Yeah, we usually go on army tangents or just speak out about BTS. And
but then here we are, like our academic, like.
Yeah. Do you think people on the like outside of the fandom would find a lot of interest? Like I know why your work is fascinating.
Sure.
Even not as an army, like in general, and the implications that it can have and the impact that stuff like that can have on different fields.
Mhm.
But someone from the outside, do you think they would easily be able to see that?
Absolutely. It's interesting. Like I said, most of the people in my life aren't BTS fans and aren't armies. So, but I do talk to them about my research, and I think as long as people are open and willing to listen, then they'll find something interesting about it, right? I have friends and family who I talk to about my research, and they're all fascinated by it. And I think that the same reaction every time is, I didn't know that they are that impactful or they're that powerful, right? Like when I show them data and tell them about these things, like they're always surprised by it. But again, there's that, and then also the other side of like, I didn't know you could even research that. So, so I think that people would certainly be interested and be fascinated if they're willing to listen and not like go into it being like, oh, ew, like K-pop and BTS, and I don't really care about it because it's just a bunch of teenagers and whatever. So as long as they're willing to listen to what's being presented to them, I think that they'll find something interesting. I mean, like pretty much like 100% of people who I've talked to about this research have found something where they're like, wow, like that's super cool. So yeah, so again, I think on the outside, I hope that more people start to be open, especially with all the attention being given right now to K-pop and BTS. I hope that people now are willing to listen, and to not just learn about it like on this broad scale, but to like go in depth about especially army and the things that they're doing more specifically that most people don't know. So there's just so much to unpack. So
Yeah, definitely. Especially like right now, you see all of a sudden all this change. People perceive K-pop. They perceive army. Like all of a sudden, they're like, "Oh, fan cams, great,
yeah
more." And so BTS donated $1 million, and army donated $1 million. So let me stand BTS.
Yeah. And I've talked to people about this before, and the hope is, even as our social media goes back to like normal, we would hope that people continue to say those same things, right? Where if they see hashtags about BTS, like we hope that the reaction isn't like, oh, BTS again. Like we hope that in their minds they're like, oh, BTS, like I remember when their fans like donated that million, like that's so cool. And I'm interested to see how that happens in the next couple of weeks and months, and how that perception either stays the same or shifts or changes. So it'll definitely be interesting. But they're definitely shine in a more positive light, but people still don't quite understand like the everything. And again, just going back to like army, like that in itself is so complex and so hard to understand for people on the outside. So there's a lot of learning to do, and hopefully we can help educate and inform more people. So
I had you just reminded me, the weirdest conversation like 2-3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
The weirdest conversation. I can't even stress enough how weird that conversation was. Because this woman who has a blue check mark posted, which is not, they're not white. It's so annoying. But anyway, she posted something. She said, I want to know more about K-pop. And this was before the donations, before anything, like just when Black Lives started.
Okay.
When people started using fan cams, that's when to like block that police app and stuff like that. So she said, can anyone tell me more about K-pop? And all the replies were like the classy, it's the dark side of K-pop, all that nonsense. Mm-hmm. So I did like an angry tweet about it, like in her thread, like because I commented to one person specifically was like, it's all manufactured, the dark side of K-pop. They kill themselves and do plastic surgeries, like that. That was the tweet, right. And I was like, dude, like rock and roll has the 27 Club. Every different industry has the dark side. Like everything. Like I went off on her, and then I contacted that person in DMs, and I was like, do you still want to learn about K-pop? And she said, yeah, thank you. So I really did like a whole explanation about K-pop in general, and then I went a bit more specific about BTS. Mm-hmm. And then she said, no, but I want to know like how are the fandoms connected, like the communication between fandoms. I said, listen, there's not real communication between fandoms. It's not the K-pop fandom. We're not one entity. We're barely, as an army, we're not one entity. So
Yeah.
So no, there's no, and there's a lot of like anger between fandoms, and it's not, you can't just bring them together. Yes, people join Black Lives Matter from every fandom, but that's because they're people. They're
Exactly.
just people. They care about that stuff. It's not, and yes, there are also racist people among those fandoms because they're first and foremost just people before they are a fandom. It's just like, I don't understand why they can't grasp that. but anyways, she said no, because, and then this is what she said. She said, Anonymous have returned and they're trying to unite fandoms under them to use them as their own army. Like what? what?
Wait, what is she to have like this check mark? Like, is she?
Yeah, so she's like a crypto something, and she won an award from Amnesty for doing something that was probably partially illegal, but she's like this advocate for whatever, like she's like this freedom fighter or something, I don't know. She's like, I tried to look it up. I couldn't find exactly like what she won an award for, or why she has this blue check. She has a Patreon that people pay her money, but she posts nothing.
That's so weird.
Yeah, like the weirdest thing ever. And then she's like, and I'm like, the anonymous, because now there's this anonymous account that posts stuff, and I said, I don't think that's the real anonymous. Like, they wouldn't use Twitter. And she said, no, they're using VPN. That's how they do it. It's safe enough. And that's them. And that's why, and she gave me like tweets that Anonymous made about like K-pop, like trying to play into K-pop what they think the K-pop mentality is, which is, I don't know anyone in the K-pop universe that will relate to what they posted. It's like that rainbow cat that used to be like Neon Cat, whatever that was, and like kawaii stuff. It's like, no, that's not it. Like pink heart, like I don't know, it was just nonsense. It's like as a thank you to K-pop fandoms. And I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna happen. Black Lives Matter unites us because there's no black or white, there's no gray area here. There's either you're a racist or you're not. There's no middle ground. This isn't a war. It's not. It's like there's very clearly either you treat people like people or you don't. So I tried to explain to her, and then she was like, yeah, no, Anonymous is dangerous. And then she posted something about how Big Hit is worried about BTS interacting with Anonymous because of the IPO. And I was like, I looked at the post and I like retweeted it to her. I was like, why on earth would you post this?
Yeah, like
he has like 80,000 followers. So I was like, I was worried it might blow up into something, but I didn't like comment on it, and no one saw it. And I was like, why would you? And she was like, she didn't answer. I was like, are you anonymous? And then I just blocked her. It was like the weirdest conversation. Like I never would have thought I would have that conversation with anyone. Those
strange.
Yeah, it was just so weird.
Yeah, I don't know where she's getting her information from, but I think like I'm pretty sure it was confirmed by like I forgot where, but it was confirmed that like there is no like official anonymous Twitter. So like I don't know.
No, it was the weirdest thing.
Yeah. You have people on Twitter like that. It's like the craziest thing.
Yeah, but she has that blue check, and I was like, what the?
But we learned that sometimes those blue check marks don't even mean anything, right? Like it doesn't make you an authority about anything just to have that stuff.
Yeah. I just remember the questions that I had. Do you ever like when you track hashtags and how they develop? Do you ever like notice how it affects when it starts at different countries? Like if, for example, like the Australia TV show that did that horrible jokes about BTS, like that the anger started in Australia and then moved around the globe, or like if something is trending first in Korea and then spreads, or in the US, like maybe like if something starts at the US, it will have more impact right from the beginning versus if it starts in I don't know, China or something.
Yeah. So at least what we found, like in looking at the maps, they're interesting, right? Because for the first, like, right around the time like some hashtag starts being created at like so let's say there's like an issue or a topic that originates in like one particular country. So yeah, you'll see some like lights on the map, like super tiny ones start to light up, and then those eventually grow, which means more people are talking about it. But then and then all of a sudden, like what normally happens with army is you'll see like a little bit more dots, and then like everybody, like, yeah, it's like, but I mean, but that just goes to show you like how connected the fandom is in terms of like social media. Like it's not like people are only following people from their own country, right? Like everyone is following people from like everywhere around the world. So that's why word spreads really, really quickly, because even if it started in the US, these people are sharing it with their networks who is like from all over the world, and then everybody just kind of catches on, and that's why you see like this, there's usually whenever we do this, there's like a sudden burst of light for the most part, or just even if there's no burst of light, it's just a ton of people from everywhere talking. So yeah, so conversation certainly starts somewhere, and if it's very focused on a certain country, like it'll stay there for a little bit, but not for long. Nothing ever stays in one place here in the army.
Interesting that it's not a wave; it's just a burst.
Yeah, people talk about that all the time, right? Like people would expect that you would be able to distinguish like time zones, for instance, right? Because you would expect like if you would expect one side like to be dark, and then like once it, like it's daytime, then it'll light up, but it's definitely not the case. I mean, army is ready to, if they're sleeping, they're ready to wake up whenever they need to wake up. So especially if something drops, right? So they're everywhere. But even then, like you can tell army just never, like a lot of them just are awake at the most odd hours. But it could also just be like, I mean, we talked about this earlier, the fact that, you know, I sometimes stay up so late because I'm afraid to go to bed because I think I'm going to miss something. So, and a lot of times that is the case, right? I mean, like last night there was a V Live and I was about to go to bed, and then I got a notification and I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to bed. So yeah, people do expect to have that, like that, those time zones, and to be able to distinguish like the different countries on the map. But you know, all in all, like I think what's cool about looking at the map is like army kind of feels like one, and you know, everyone's on the same page. It's a really cool thing.
It would be really interesting to do a research about it from like, because when you do you interact different, and you promote something differently when it's done in a way versus when it's done when everyone knows it at the same time.
Yeah.
And it would be really interesting to see like research of how the information's not just information, but how you can utilize it to create those, to use those bursts, like that everything just lights up at once. It's kind of insane. It would be like, it's like there's stuff to see here.
Yeah, there's definitely, yeah, for sure, I agree.
Do you find it weird that out of all the social platforms that there are out there, that Twitter became Army's home?
No, not surprised. I think it all comes back down to like each social media platform's like functions and what they're there for and what people can use them for. Twitter is like the perfect platform to interact with other people, to promote things, to be as engaged as possible. So it's definitely the best place for Army to thrive. And so I think whether or not they realize that, it was just the perfect home for Army. But again, it's not to say that Army isn't on other platforms, because there's certainly lots of them, millions of them on things like Instagram and Facebook, and we have Weverse, but that interaction and that engagement doesn't exist. And I think that's what makes Army so impactful on things like Twitter. And a lot of things that happen on Twitter are really, really impactful. I mean, when you just think about it, a lot of people wake up every day and the first thing they check is Twitter to see like what's happening in the news, right? So that platform in itself has become really powerful just to the normal person. So yeah, I think that engagement piece that Twitter has, it's probably what's its most unique aspect. And then the fact that it has trends too, makes it makes it really special. But yeah, all in all, I'm definitely not surprised. I mean, that was the place where like One Direction fans thrived as well. So it only made sense that if social media was going to evolve, then ARMY were still going to be on that same platform, and then they were going to elevate it even more. Yeah, I just don't know if, like I said, there's a lot of ARMYs on Instagram, but I don't really know how impactful that is, because it almost feels like ARMYs are just kind of in their
Yeah,
own
no,
little.
Instagram, it's mostly for, I think you're very right. I think it's all about the communication
Yeah.
and the ease of it. Like Facebook is too convoluted, and I think, and also doesn't have that same safe environment that Twitter has. And I think that, I don't know if you were active back then. Like, did you ever use ICQ?
ICQ. That doesn't sound familiar.
It was like in the like 97, 98. It was the early social media.
Oh no, I probably wouldn't have known that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think really the first social media app, I would say. Like, it was on your computer. You could put it on like the old phones. You could also put it on, like if you had like an affinity for coding and science. So some people actually had it on their old phones, not those very first cell phones, but well, not the very first, not the micro, but the second generation cell phones. But it was like it's a lot of like chat rooms where you had to have like someone's. You didn't have a name. You had a number, a very, very long 13, 14 digit number. For older people that got like in later, you had like 18 or 21 digits. It was insane, but you remembered all of it, and you would give it to people. And it was like chat rooms before they were like it was a chat room, but it was mobile because you could put it on the phone. You could put it on your computer very easily and create this like home for your friends, for people to talk about shared interests. And it was, unlike chat rooms, they had that friend function.
Yeah.
And you could pass like things back then. If you put two phones next to each other, you could pass information. So there was all that, and I think Twitter is kind of a new aged ICQ, because it's like, it's all about those friends with similar interests. You don't have to be friends. You just have to have that similar interest that connects you. And also you have that coverage of like that no one knows who you really are, as opposed to Facebook or
yeah, there's definitely like more of a level of that anonymity on Twitter, but I mean, you can certainly do that on Facebook and Instagram too. But I mean, for fandoms, like it's really great, like community building on Twitter, and I don't think that people expected that to be, but and especially with a group as large as ARMY, you wouldn't think that they would be able to come together as well as they have on that app. But I mean, they're so structured and have a really great system in place. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating that they've been able to really dominate that app and take it over and do some really, really cool things with it. So
yeah, also like ARMY really found a way to make that app organized, like with like, because it could be so chaotic, and yet ARMY really has managed to find ways to do those, like one in ARMY that does the charity, and BTS chart data that does the streaming parties, and you have big accounts that decide on hashtags and then spread it through other accounts, and immediately like decision making. Like, I don't know if you saw it with the Match a Million, like when we were getting close to match that million, and deciding on what hashtag to use, and it kept changing like in the last few minutes.
I noticed that, yeah.
And yet people really, like, that information passed so quickly to
Very quick.
for matched the million to 2 million for BLM, to make it about the Black Lives Matter movement. And that it happened so quickly. It's really impressive how, and even the whole Match a Million project happened incredibly fast.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, it helps to have all of these big fan bases to help with the conversation, right? I think what people are super fascinated by is you have a lot of these really big influential accounts. I mean, like looking at a lot of these fan bases, you see like not just tens of thousands, but like hundreds of thousands, and even some have millions of followers, right? So if you have a bunch of these fan bases who are all saying the exact same thing, and like it's so easy to just trickle that information down, and then everyone just starts spreading it to their own individual networks. So yeah, word travels super fast in the fandom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If only that fake fandom account would also trend stuff.
I know. They had a lot of followers. I like crazy.
We have 4.3 million.
Yeah.
Imagine what we could have done.
I know. I agree. But I know regardless, the fandom's been doing great. So
yeah, definitely doing great. Okay, so I have like a few tiny questions here. Someone asked, how do you define baby army? I think each person defines for themselves their baby army.
Yeah. So funny. I have a friend who like for her first couple like weeks to months of being in army, she called herself a baby army, and then once she started getting more comfortable with the fandom and BTS, she upgraded herself to a kindergarten army. Yeah. So it's like personal preference, I guess, on how would you say baby army. I don't really think that there's like a standard like time frame that people would consider themselves baby army. I just feel like people like eventually feel like they know enough and are a part of the fandom enough to be able to like distinguish themselves from being like a new army to being like, okay, like I'm like really comfortable here. Yeah, but definitely no time frame. So yeah.
Also, if you feel like you're a baby army, we have the army history series you can check out. Shameless plug.
Yes, you'll learn a lot from those sorts of things. Yeah.
We did 3 episodes, and apparently we already need to do 1 more. So much stuff going on. Like we missed that we haven't talked about army academia yet.
Oh man.
And we haven't talked about R3 yet, and about the radio project at Army. This is so much.
Yeah, it's too much going on. I know, just when you think you've covered like a good chunk, like there's always something new. Yeah,
I was like, we're done. Okay, 3 episodes, each one is 3 hours long. It's fun. And then the day I posted it, I saw like a bunch, like 5 new stuff, and I was like, no.
Yeah, I know, that's always how it is. Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of done.
Awesome.
We did 3 hours.
Which didn't feel like it.
It didn't feel like it. It never feels like it. We always like have so much. It's just so much fun to talk to a fellow army and chat and it never feels like it always passes so quickly.
Yeah, and there's like so much more that we can talk about beyond this too, like never ending. Yeah, so but I enjoyed this. I really appreciated you having me on here. So
that's awesome. You're always welcome here.
Awesome.
Whether it's to talk more about your research or just to have fun. I intend this podcast to be just a platform for all army who want to talk, just like have fun talking about army stuff and BTS. Because like I said, not a lot of us have people in our real life to talk about. So the whole point is just because it's just to give people a chance to actually voice and not just write what they say. So you're always welcome here, and this was super fun.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad you came here. Like this was so interesting and so much fun. And your research sounds fascinating, and I can't wait to be able to read it when it comes out.
Thank you. I'm excited for everything to come. So yeah, there'll be a lot.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Great. So everyone, good night or good day, depends on what your time zone is. And thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. Send a lot of purple hearts for Nicole's way. And thank you, and goodbye.